Let's hope that this works, because I remember once when I was streaming in VR, it did not work.
Oh no.
But it works. Streams my screen, but okay. Doesn't matter. Then everyone can see I've been watching the Angry Video Game Nerd.
How dare you?
How dare!
That's another blast from the blast from the past.
I kind of liked this episode about Polybius.
Hmm.
So I was rewatching it earlier.
Oh man, that was so long ago. The only episode of his that I remember discreetly as a very like clear memory is the one that he did of that Zelda ripoff. It's like the Tower or something.
Dark Tower?
Yeah.
He also had Dark Castle, the Castlevania ripoff. There were so many. Also, for everyone who's now in the chat, we are here today with Solo Citizens, the author of the fandom classic story Awakening.
How are you doing?
Well,
I'm Solo Citizen. I guess I wrote a classic.
You did.
Well, thank you. That's incredibly flattering to hear.
Awakening is one of those fandom classics that, in my opinion, everyone should have read or listened to. Now available at Pony&Wolf Productions. But I personally first became aware of your story when Equestrian Narrator did.
Oh, really?
Yes. I was really frustrated when he didn't finish it.
We can say that about a lot of narrators, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that more or less the job of your channel?
Basically, yes. My channel started out doing stories that other people hadn't finished.
Yeah, and I kind of picked up that thing too, and I mistakenly picked up really long stories.
Which long stories?
Astrehu. There's 12 books to that, and each one's about 200 chapters.
I'm back.
Oh my gosh.
Right now, I'm almost done with the first one, and then I gotta go to the second one.
Don't get me started. Someone posted the poll that I forgot to set to private on Patreon on which story to do next, and then it ended up being Fallout Equestria, Project Horizons.
It's not that long.
That was 6 years ago.
Someone posted that poll on their Facebook page, prompting all of their friends to vote for Project Horizon.
That's rough, buddy.
Ah, that story.
About killed us. It killed most of the crew, actually. I was the only survivor.
Yeah, I remember Simon. Simon was one of the other former editors. One of his schoolmates, Alex, he said while editing Horizons, he would come to school with a dead look on his face.
I still talk to Simon every now and again. He's still working on assets and stuff for the
Overmare.
Fallout. Yeah, for the Fallout Equestria game.
As the thing is this, Simon left our crew to join Overmare Studios to work on the Fallout Equestria computer game.
Oh. How's that coming along?
So far as I remember, last update I saw, they are now not doing the entire story, but only up until Ponyville and...
Yep.
Yeah. That's a project and a half.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've got a few other friends that are beta testing the game, so
anyhow. So, does any one of you especially have any questions for our guest right now?
So, why ponies in space?
To tell you the truth, I'm still trying to figure that out myself. I used to have a very strong aversion to fan fiction, to writing it at all. And I remember that I was trying to write a story in the summer of my going into my junior year at college, and it just wasn't working out. Like, I'm not sure if I would go so far as to say the concept was just a bad one, but the concept was just sort of a bad one. It was just incredibly painful trying to write it and make any headway. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna go do something for me. I feel like I've been working too hard at this, that I've just been beating my head against a wall. I just want to do a project that's going to be refreshing and nice. And I kind of had this image of a unicorn kind of lost in space and stranded on an icy planet. And I was like, you know what? I don't know where this concept's going to take me, but I'm just going to start writing it. And I did that very same evening. And yeah, no, it just became what it was very, very organically over the course of about a month. I don't think that I've ever worked as furiously to complete a project as I did Awakening. I think it's the only time that I've actually managed to write a complete story in about month and a half. Yeah. No, it was difficult, but also one of the most rewarding things that I did, and no intentions of like making it available for readers at the time. But I wanted to get it edited once I completed the first draft of it, because I thought it was kind of special, you know, looking at it and seeing it in its complete form. And I reached out to somebody in the fandom. It was just one of those little like Chan writing boards, not the infamous 4chan, but one of its derivatives that was related to Pony and Pony fan fiction. And I heard back from this guy called Anonymous Samurai. And at the time, I didn't realize it, but he was one of the pre-readers at Equestria Daily. And he really helped me to polish the story. And it was the first time that I had someone actually working with me in a very like intentional and dedicated way on editing this story. Like, you know, any story really. And when it was all said and done, I was just like, you know, I got to post this somewhere. I gotta make it available. I think that's the only way to kind of honor the effort that went into, you know, making it.
I think all kind of emphasize with this.
Yeah.
Also, I sent you a link, Solo. That is one of my personal longest written projects.
Oh wow! I'm opening up the Google Docs now.
Oh
my!
That story.
No, I see the page. I'm scrolling through, and the page count just keeps going up and up and up.
Yeah. I added like half that story so, for the audio
you
works.
did. Yes, you did.
That's cool, though. I mean, we have to give credit where credit is due as far as the effort that goes into pretty much any fan project. I mean, I know that within our little fandom and our little community, there's a notion that anything beneath 100,000 words is considered a short story or a novella. And it's like, you got to keep in mind, Blade Runner was only 55,000 words.
Well, I remember distinctly there was an instance, I was part of a narrator's chat back then.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if the name Obab Scribbler means anything to you.
Sounds familiar.
He has like over 300,000 subs by now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Also a storyteller, narrator, and voice actor. She posted a link in that chat saying, I kind of want that as an audiobook, but it's too long for most people. I looked at it, and it was, I think, 20,000 words.
It's like, that's nothing.
Of
course, for her channel, she kind of does a lot of short stories and stuff like that. So
The funny part about that was, for her birthday that year, I recorded that thing and sent it to her. It was a story about that kind of went in the direction of Harry Pratchett's style.
Ah, okay.
But with Lyra, Derpy, Octavia, and the god of death and destruction that lives in their fridge.
Yeah, that sounds very Terry Pratchett, honestly.
But yeah, Solo, as you said, in terms of story length, everyone in here, we have stories with 100,000 words or less. That's a weekend.
Yeah.
A weekend of recording / editing.
Wow.
It's kind of, when you put it into perspective, like Australia, I think with 200 chapters on it, it has like less words than Project Horizons in 3 chapters. 3 chapters of Project Horizons is not worth the 200 chapters in Australia. So,
Project Horizons is over 195 hours long.
Yeah,
Oh my
like
gosh.
each chapter, like 2 to 3 hours. It's just amazing.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, just the sheer volume and scale of some of these, so many of the fan projects that exist within our little community. It's staggering. I think that it also kind of lends people to kind of losing perspective in a lot of way on just, what their project is and the scale of it in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I tell people all the time for whenever they're doing audiobooks is you take the run length for the audio and he times it by 2, and then you add another 2 hours on top of that.
Yeah, but I also would like to know something that we as a team have struggled with. I mean, you editors, not so much. I deal with the people. But oftentimes we have a situation where people demand the next chapter of something.
Yeah.
I know, you guys don't really have to deal with that. That's Midnight and me who have to do that.
I deal with it on my own channel, and people kind of understand, like, okay, summer is your time off. It's fine now. Well,
Have you ever had that with Awakening?
Not with Awakening, because, well, I mean, it's kind of unusual, and I'd say this about Planet Hell too, that I don't start posting chapters until the entire work is completed and edited, and that just helps in a lot of ways to cut down on the length between each update, because there's no way that I could at my current output ever write a chapter in a week and have it polished and ready to go up on FimFic. But I more or less was able to do that for Awakening very consistently at 3 p.m. my time every Friday until the entire story was complete. And I had the when I first published, posted the story and made it live, I had 3 or 4 chapters ready to go, and that really helped people to get into it and understand what the story was about and see where it was going and get invested. And that really did help me avoid the pitfall of ending a chapter on a cliffhanger and then just spending months or years waiting, keeping people waiting for an update. And I completely broke and violated that rule with Planet Hell. Because I hadn't edited it at all until I had the first, well, no, I shouldn't say that. I had the first few chapters edited, and I was like, I can do the rest of this while I'm posting it. And I got about halfway through, and there were just holes in it, like a leaking ship, and the plot was all over the place, and I'm like, I really should have spent more time editing this and looking at the outline and getting the story lined up correctly. I was like, I just needed to spend a few months to do this, and I left it on a cliffhanger and didn't come back for 2 years.
It's fine. Bling the eye to the internet, right?
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of Through the Eyes of Another Pony. I'm still waiting for updates on that story. But but the author of that one says about himself, "Hey, I'm a troll."
I'm gonna leave it and let you guys wonder.
Oh
my gosh.
Story said it is written in 2 versions, one film fiction version and one Equestria Daily version.
Oh.
That's great.
Oh boy.
And the Equestria Daily version is much longer, but has the missing chapters, but the film fiction version, which is supposed to be the revised version, which I find much more funny, misses several chapters. Just goes from chapter 9 to chapter 14.
Is that an overall improvement, for the story, or is that to its detriment and he was trying to shape it for the format in some way?
To be honest, he was putting out chapters for a while of the revised version, and I remember, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, he did the last release of a revised chapter. The thing is, it was really to the story's benefit that he went ahead and revised it. Because he cut out a lot of the unnecessary stuff that was just dragging on. But
I forgot to unplug my clock whenever I started this, and
oh, is that what that was?
Yeah,
fine.
But when we are in that regard, I kind of want to ask the question. I mean, Death already asked the whole thing with why ponies.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come up with the whole thing with Pegasus clan being warmongering people who then annexed that unicorn planet? I remember.
Yeah, it was Arion.
He
I
winged
think
it.
I think in some ways I stumbled upon a lot of good ideas unintentionally. And I hate to say that because, it makes me sound like I'm a better writer than I am. But a lot of Awakening success, I think, was just a matter of kind of unconsciously recognizing the elements that make a good story and just sort of winging it without really being able to consciously name what they were. I think that the reason why I felt the need to have the Pegasus be the bad guys was that I understood the need for a body of work or set of material that spans potentially many books, is the need for some sort of central conflict or central tension that kind of unites the overall world and setting and makes it coherent. And having one of the tribes stray so far from the values of the show of, friendship and harmony and balance in a lot of ways with yourself and others, having them stray so far to become warmongers and responsible for a lot of the troubles in the setting, that makes for a really good sort of central conflict that can unite the overall story. That said, I did not understand that at the time. And it was just sort of, this sounds like a good idea. I'll just put this on the page and we'll run with it.
Okay.
Put it on and run. Everything's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Screw it. We'll do it live.
Do it live.
Exactly. We'll sort it out in the editing.
Remember, you can write drunk, but you have to edit sober.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I personally, when I first listened to Awakening on Western Narrator's channel, I really enjoyed the setting and that you were going back and forth between present and the past.
Oh, thank you.
And I will admit it right here, if you ever take a look at my Fallout Equestria story that I sent you there, I might have ripped that off.
Hey, when stealing, steal from the best, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's how I arrived at that mechanic.
Okay.
More or less. I stole it from somebody that was much better than myself. And I realize that this is ironic, sort of, to say this, because our perceptions of him have changed so much over the years and the years that followed Awakening. But that comes straight from Lost. I was like, I have this character, and she has a backstory, but how do I integrate it? I could do. I don't want to lean too far. I don't want to lean too hard on like exposition and just sort of explain it to the readers. And I don't want to have, I don't want to be doing flashbacks randomly because that's also very inconsistent and kind of crummy. But I was like, well, Lost did a thing where they made flashbacks a regular part of the show and the format, and it worked out really well. Maybe if I make flashbacks a regular part of the format, that would work really well too. And it did. But that is something that I completely ripped off. Okay. I tried to make a nod to it with that whole make your own kind of music thing. And I remember that one chapter opens almost exactly like that big episode of Lost where you find out what's in the hatch, and it's a guy. Spoilers for Lost. That.
Oh no, I haven't watched the show yet, but I don't care. Go ahead.
Oh no, spoilers!
I've watched season 1.
IP.
Spoilers for like 10 years old.
Yeah, where they find out what's in the hatch after an entire season of trying to get inside of it, and it's some Scottish dude going through his daily routine, and he's listening to that song. And I put that almost beat by beat into the opening of one of the chapters. What was it called? See, I remember all the beats of this story, but I have to remind myself at this point what the chapters are called.
Was it
Magic and Steel?
Ah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was about to say, was it the song that Lumina is singing at the beginning?
Oh yeah, no, that too. Like, that's the reason why that song is in there and that little sequence is in there. Is I wanted to say, hey, I wanted to play homage to J.J. Abrams a bit, but I also wanted to, nod to the fact that, most of my good ideas I got from someone who's much more talented than myself.
Well, you know what they
Go ahead.
What they say. I'm sorry. Good artist copies, a great artist steals.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, at the beginning, the song Lumina sings, I actually looked up the lyrics to see what song it was, and then tried to sing it in Lumina's voice.
I remember that.
I'm not a great singer at all, but yeah, I think I at least got the rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
I did a thing. That is all I'm willing to say on the matter.
I mean, I do appreciate, any artist that puts themselves out there and takes a creative risk like that,
Mm.
Like, if nothing else, I think that's what this fandom is great for, and having, fan fiction and fan projects in general, is that, yeah, you can take creative risks with relative impunity. It's not like, say, if you're a published author or trying to get published, or the project is commercial in some way, then you have the constant burden of, what's the actual economics of what I'm working with. Can I actually take this creative risk? Can I not? But fan fiction is very liberating in that regard.
Unless you are someone like Stephen King, who puts stuff in his novels that sometimes would people get arrested if they talked publicly about it.
Yeah.
Just it as an example, the scene near the end.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think I know what you mean. I haven't read it. I haven't finished it anyway.
There's a scene,
but I think I know what you're talking about.
There's a scene where they have all to reconnect with one another.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had the uncensored audiobook of it, and I'm like, what the hell? That wasn't in the movie. Yeah. I'm pretty sure the movie would never have been published if it had been.
Yeah. I mean, he was on a lot of drugs when he made it.
Not as much as the people who made LSD Simulator. But yeah, it is true what you said. In fan fiction, you can get away with way more than in a project where you want monetary gains.
Mm-hmm.
So we also see it a lot in our fandom that some authors, and my editors here will know who I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not. I don't know. You might have to explain things.
Look, Solo,
please go into great detail.
Solo, have you ever read Fallout Equestria Project Horizons?
I mean, I'm passingly familiar with the work. I never read the Fallout Equestria material though.
Well, you want to check it. Might want to check it out on our channels. There is like all wallet quests that you might ever want. However, in Horizons Chapter 34, little spoiler: the main character dies in Chapter 33, actually, and the author put down author's notes that you will not be able to find nowadays because he changed them.
Oh.
The author's notes read, "Yeah, hi, I just moved to Las Vegas to take a job here, but right now paying bills is more important to me than writing. If, however," and then link to Patreon page, "I make enough money to pay my bills, I will continue this story."
Yeah. Holding you hostage.
Yeah.
You want to see more blackjack? Then you better pay me.
Yeah.
I mean, I have so many thoughts about that. I know that it's really tempting to, go for monetization or Patreon support. Because, there comes a point where any amount of money coming in is a huge boon. But I feel like, one, if you're asking people to support you financially for your work, it better be damn good. But secondly, being able to write full-time, let alone part-time, is an incredible achievement as far as your career goes.
Yeah.
Like, you have to understand that most authors who are able to write full-time don't leave their day job until after their second bestseller. Like, if you're able to achieve that in fandom, good for you, but that's kind of that's the measure of what that has historically taken.
The thing is this, the Pony&Wolf channel only has a Patreon because back when it was still only me, people were asking me how they were able to support me and if I had a PayPal account or Patreon.
Oh, yeah.
I was pushed to create these accounts.
Yeah, and that's normally how it happens. I don't mean any criticism against the people that, are able to do fan projects and get a little bit of a cash flow coming in. But it's, once again, I think the scale of stuff in the fandom is kind of blinding to the realities that have historically kind of faced people in a lot of way.
Yeah.
Or that has traditionally defined media. Thank God that, people are able to do creative projects and get money coming in for them and to support them, and they don't have to go through a publication process or get an agent or completely crush their soul trying to be a commercial author or commercial artist. But it's traditionally kind of been where things have stood.
One reason why I would never try to go professional is this.
Yeah.
I enjoy my work, just like I enjoy cooking, but that doesn't mean I want to do it for a living.
Yeah. But I think that, you're able to have a Patreon and it work out. That's good for you. That's a major accomplishment.
Yeah, I have one too, but I don't push it at all. It's just sitting in the description of my stuff. And I don't push it because, like I said, I only do this during the winter. So
yeah. I remember that Mandalore Gaming kind of had a similar situation where you didn't have a Patreon, you didn't want any support, he was just doing it for fun, but people kept badgering him about how they can support his work, and he eventually made a Patreon just for that reason.
Yeah. It was kind of the same story here. And the only reward people are really after nowadays is early access to Fallout Equestria Homelands.
Yeah. We got to know what happens to the one that is named Tape.
Scotch Tape. Daughter of Duct Tape.
The Tape family will live on.
The daughter of Duct Tape and P21. But to get back to Awakening, what I was really wondering, when I write a story, and I think everyone here who has written a story can agree, coming up with names, especially in the pony universe, can be a problem. Because
oh yeah,
I remember I once wanted to call a character Carrot Cake, and then I heard that it was kind of the name of Mr. Cake.
yeah. One's gonna think that they're related.
Yeah. And
I cheat. I look up band names. And modify them.
So how did you come up with the name Lumina?
I think that either, at least in my case, either I put a lot of thought into names, or I don't put any in at all. In Lumina's case, or Lumina, it was very intentional. I wanted to have a name that kind of structurally related to light in some way. And I was like, luminescence, luminosity, luminal. It's like, yeah, that sounds like a good one. Luminal, as in related to light. And then I took the L off.
Okay.
I think it's kind of fascinating though how that name evolved, because in my head at least, I always referred to her as Lumina. And I didn't think it was until Equestria Narrator came along that at least I settled on the pronunciation of Lumina.
Lumina.
But I mean, that's just me. When you're reading a story, you can't tell people how to inflect upon a word or I think it's just yeah.
How people say homage. Like everybody, like all the narrators say it differently. Exactly. Homage, homage, yeah. It's just like
it's a French word, homage.
It's great though.
But in that regard, guys, I had a really nice canonical pony show MLP moment.
What was that?
You are passingly familiar with Fallout Equestria. So you know that there is a DJ Pawn 3 in that?
Yeah, I'm aware.
And for ages, people have been badgering me. It's DJ Pony, not DJ Pawn 3. And then there was this scene in the show where Twilight pulled out vinyl from the bush and was like, "Here, that's DJ Pawn 3." I loved it.
That's got to be one of the best. I was right the whole time.
Yes.
I mean, when Equestria Narrator came along and pressed me about how to pronounce Lumina's name, he gave me the alternate pronunciation, and I just had this moment where I felt like I had been mispronouncing her name the entire time in my head that I was writing that story. Like I'll even still regress back to it every now and again.
So I must say there's one particular scene in the story that I must say is one of my favorites.
Which one's that?
It is when Lumina is put into that vault with Animus.
Oh, yeah.
To see if she will go crazy or not. And after how long? 8 hours? 10 hours? They open,
something like that.
They open the vault and she's just totally relaxed, sitting there and talking with Animus.
About ponies with socks.
Yes.
Yes.
Lumina, I have no data about ponies with socks.
I mean, if you can't reference the fandom a little bit in your fan work, yeah, what's the point? I mean, that's the other thing too. Like that scene, I had no idea what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go with it when I sat down to write it. When you're kind of envisioning a story in your head, at least in my regard, the ones that stand out to me when I'm sitting down to write are the ones that I've kind of stolen or decided to pay homage to some other work of fiction, but it's always the stuff that you arrive at naturally and organically that kind of stick with people. Like that one.
And that was just...
You mentioned that the whole story was more written in a flow, but were there any 180 turn decrees or any cut content?
I mean, the big one was the decision to do the flashbacks, because I was into chapter 3 or 4 at the time, and the story had become something akin to just pulling out teeth again. And I was like, I really just don't want to be here. I wrote this story to try and get away from that. How do I introduce her backstory and talk about it in a way that's fun and fresh and that I can get behind? And I was just like, I need to sort this out, and I'm not going to come back to the story until I do. Fortunately, that was only like a couple days later when I was watching Lost, and I was like, that's a good way of handling that.
I do have a question though. What advice would you give to someone who's writing time?
Is what?
What advice? I'm sorry. What advice would you give somebody who's writing some first story for the
first time? Yeah. I'd say if it's your first time writing and you have a longer work in mind, I would say 2 things, and that's try to bite off more than you can chew. Try to tackle a project that you might have greater ambitions for than you technically know how to realize. I would say that I've written, I don't know how many novel-length stories, that were at 50, somewhere between 50,000 or 100,000 or more in length. But the ones that led to my biggest kind of creative spurts were the ones that were more ambitious than I knew how to accomplish. And just sort of pushing myself to rise to meet that challenge led to my personal biggest kind of growths as a writer in a lot of ways. And I'd also say if it's your, I think this is true for, anytime you sit down and write, but I think it's doubly true if if it's your first story and it's not likely to get posted someplace or be widely read, just try to have fun with it. Like, if the story is painful and kind of grinding to get through, try to think about why that is, why it's grinding, why it's difficult, and say, hey, what do I need to do to make this fun and enjoyable for myself? Okay. Because I think that a lot of ways writing reflects the headspace that you're in more so than you realize. And so if you're just not having fun writing a story, if your your writing process is very tortured, then that reflects in the actual narrative and in the actual prose of it.
I see.
Yeah, like Stephen King. He's a good example. He would get really high on cocaine and then stimulants and then lock himself in a broom closet until he reached 100,000 words, and he wasn't allowed to get out for any reason until he did that. And look at his work. Not to say that it isn't good, but it's very tortured.
To say the least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I must say, his Dark Tower series is one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm. Also one of his more tortured, too.
Yeah. I'd say probably my hardest thing with the writing process is coming up with filler stuff. Like, I know what I want to do for the beginning. I know what I want to do for the end. Just trying to get stuff in the middle. That is the tricky part for me. So.
Yeah.
I see.
No, and that's very understandable. I'd say, though, too, like, if the filler doesn't excite you, try to figure out why that is. Look at, how can I make this something that I'm excited about? What can I do to make this something I can get fully behind,
Yeah, and if you're not behind it, then most likely nobody else would be behind it either, so.
Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of reflects in Planet Hell a little bit, too. Oh, and there's a question from the chat, too. Mm-hmm. I'll get to that in just a second. Like, I gave myself the space with Awakening to take creative risks. I have ADHD. I've been medicated in some ways to be productive pretty much my entire life up till that point. And I really wasn't enjoying my writing because of it. And I was like, fuck it. This is just a pony story. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. I'm just going to take the creative gamble and approach this in a way that I would enjoy writing it. And it worked out. And when I wrote Planet Hell, I brought back all my kind of traditional writing techniques, all my traditional writing process. And it was very tortured. And there was a lot of filler that I don't think, looking back on it, needed to be there because of it. And I don't think that it was as enjoyable a story for that reason.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
I personally, when I had stuff where I wanted to do a quote-unquote filler in Duty, for example, I wrote a story, a chapter, where my character has to relearn how to use her magic and tries to bake a cake.
Mm-hmm.
Basically destroying her kitchen while doing it.
I mean, that's very admirable of her.
Only good times were had in Duty. There's no bad times at all.
No. There
The
were.
worst part was when the cake was when the kitchen was destroyed. It's very tragic.
so tragic that in later chapters people wrote comments that they needed like 3 hours to listen to a 40-minute chapter because they couldn't go on because they were in tears.
No, not the cake. It's the most important character.
Yeah, it was so sad.
Also, I don't know what the operating procedure here is, but mind if I take a question from the text chat?
For it.
Go ahead. It's
Hey, so
Solo. Just you're asking about operating procedure. Thing is, there are basically no rules here. The only rule is be polite to one another.
okay.
Yeah.
And don't loop the audio through the YouTube video back through here, because it'll give everyone a headache.
I'll be right back, but you do that.
Okay.
Well, don't do the loop.
Wait, you're giving me permission?
No.
No, Ninja. If you do that, I'll mute you.
I'm kidding.
Black Void Dragon asks, "Hey, Solo Citizen, why did you have Miss Nova remove his wings rather than conceal him with some sort of technology, like a disguise?" Well, I guess sort of. I mean, I know that the show kind of depicts the wings as kind of, just something that's sort of just drawn into their side. It doesn't really have a whole lot of three-dimensionality to it. But I personally always kind of saw them as a bit bulkier.
Mm-hmm.
Like an actual kind of wing. Probably something that wouldn't be too disguisable.
It matters how realistic you want to go with it too.
And I think also too, it just makes for a better story if he had them removed somehow. And truth be told, if in this setting there probably is technology to put them back on.
I have a thought. Perhaps while you could disguise the physical wings, by all known laws of aviation, the Pegasi should not be allowed to fly. So
that's what I said. How realistic do you want to go? Do you want to make it so they can actually fly, so their wings would be about 3 times the actual length of their body, or something like that? Or
so what I assume is that because they can't fly on their own, they need magic to fly, and what they detect. So perhaps there's not a technology to conceal that magic.
Well, at least in this setting, magic has been entirely forgotten about, and there's no connection to it.
I should remember that.
That's okay.
The whole entire arc about Lumina learning magic was something. So,
yeah. So I mean, if I always thought that their flight was more magical in nature than. Because, I mean, we see them walking on clouds and doing other stuff. And in some ways, Thundergale's arc in Planet Hell was about him learning his magic and being able to fly by the end of the story. Not very well, but he's the first Pegasus to do so in thousands and thousands of years. And so, wings, they're mostly non-functional. They just sort of attach to their body. They don't really do anything.
I see.
Well, you can give wing hugs with them.
exactly. That is
And visuals back.
the game.
And I am back.
Welcome back.
Thank
Oh
you.
no!
But yeah, I must personally say that producing Awakening, for me, it was one of the first stories I ever added to my read later list.
Oh,
Yes. It was kind
that's
of
excellent.
a passion project, you might say. At this time, I didn't even ask my Patreons. I was just like, I'm doing this.
And he dragged all of us along for the ride, like, you're doing this too. I was like, oh, man.
Hey, wasn't it actually... No, that was Vinyl Scratch Tapes where you said you waited for someone to do this. And that project eventually died.
Yeah, I was so sad.
Yeah, I mean... We had everyone, we had all the voices, and then our Spitfire VA didn't deliver, then Octavia dropped out, then eventually the Vinyl VA stopped answering.
Everything just died in the water, and I was so upset because I was doing like the narrations for the openings and closings. So
that was the first and only story so far, actually, that I didn't do the narration for. I only had the director part.
Yeah, I was pretty much doing all the editing and gave it to Visual, like, is this good? And he's like, yeah, go with it. I'm like, okay.
I give my editors complete creative freedom.
Well, I mean, you guys did a good job with the project. I still haven't listened to all the chapters yet. Because, I mean, it's like, for me at least, it's such a trip back into the past. It's like I listen for about 5 minutes. I'm like, okay, I got to pause. I got to get up and walk around. Got to prepare myself and then listen to the story again. Because it's just like everything comes back. Like I haven't thought about this story in probably about a year and a half. Like I think about Lumina all the time when I write, when I sit down to think about my protagonists and any of my current writing projects, because I think that she is really compelling. But the story, and it's like I just remember all the little details in my life at the time, and it's just like oh gosh. It just hits me.
But I think here comes a question that all of those people who love the story are dying to get an answer to.
What's that?
Will you ever do a direct sequel to show us what becomes of Animus and Lumina?
Leave it for speculation.
I will say that was the intent. That was the intent all along. Like, you have to understand that I have written, I think before this, 3 other, before doing any sort of like fan fiction. This is not even counting all the short stories that I did, but just like in high school and in college, up until when I tackled this project, I had written 3 full-length novels, and I didn't publish them. They didn't go anywhere. I didn't even post them online or anything. But there were, these huge sort of lost sci-fi projects, and they were fine and cool, but just not the quality or as compelling as Awakening. And I had always intended to do a direct sequel for each and every one of those. And I never did. Because I was like, well, the story just, it's just not worth it. I want to move on my writing, and just, this is just something that's going to live in my hard drive. Like 3 people are going to read it. And then when I finished Awakening, I was like, damn it, I want to actually commit. I'm gonna make an entire series, and I'm gonna tell the story of each element of Harmony independently, and then we're gonna bring them all together in a direct sequel, and we're gonna approach it like it's the Hyperion Cantos by Dan Simmons, and it's gonna be great, and it's gonna be on the scale of the Avengers and the MCU. Like we're gonna go full bore into the cinematic universe.
Seriously,
And-
if you were ever to decide to really do that, let me know. We'll produce it.
Yeah.
I had intended to, but like it took me over a year to do the first draft of Planet Hell, in stark contrast to Awakening, which I just cranked out in about a month and a half over the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this mindset of, if I just approach everything like I approached Awakening, I can do this. I can make all these bodies of work happen. And then in the process of writing Planet Hell, I was like, this isn't practical. Like I still have a tremendous output, but the story's more difficult. It's more challenging than I anticipated. For one thing in particular that I think that was to its detriment and kind of led it to be a much more challenging writing process in general and just more time demanding was I had written Awakening and I was moving into Planet Hell, and I was also watching Evangelion for the first time.
Neon Genesis Evangelion?
Like, yeah, exactly. And I was like, you know what? I want an unlikable protagonist like Shinji. I want someone that people are going to love to hate.
I personally, I related to Shinji a little bit. I liked him.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think everyone does, but there's also, he's such a flawed personality, and that's part of why he's compelling in some ways. He's kind of a paradox. Like, he's very flawed, he's insecure, he's not likable, but he's compelling as a protagonist for all of the above.
There was one character in Evangelion that I really loved to hate.
Mm-hmm.
Suryu.
Yep. Asuka Langley Soyu.
Actually, her actual name is Suryu Asuka Langley.
Oh. And she's one of those, I mean, it's just such a trope in anime where they have a European but Japanese in every way, shape, and form. Which, I mean,
let me see if I can find the song.
But to kind of come back to why there hasn't been a follow-up, I came to the realization in writing Planet Hell that it's just not going to be practical, like, to do this expanded body of work like I was envisioning, of writing a full-length novel or novella for each of the elements of harmony and then bring them together in an Avengers style explosion of content. I mean, like, Stephen King kind of managed to pull that off, but look how long Dark Tower took him to do. Like, that was... And I was like, I don't know if I want to commit 20, 30 years of my life to this. I kind of want to move on and do other projects, too.
But to be fair, Dark Tower was an amazing series.
Oh, yeah.
With all the references to the real world. And even him bringing himself in as a character. Yeah.
Yeah, and including all of his other bodies of work into the story and the world and the setting.
But
that was incredible.
But what I really liked was the incorporation of, for example, Father Callahan from A Salem's Lot.
I didn't get that far into Dark Tower. That was the Wolves of Kala, right?
I think.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I made it to the second one.
Ah, okay.
Unfortunately, but that.
I have listened to the entire story.
Wow.
And I must tell you, near the end, it gets really, really, really dark.
Yeah. No, that was pretty much what I was anticipating.
I think it was the second book where he saves Jake from that ghost in the summoning circle.
Mm-hmm.
That later comes back to bite him. Because one of his enemies uses his seed that he spills during that ritual to inseminate a demon.
Yeah, that's never something that, you want to do.
Yeah. That
generally leads to bad things.
Let's just say he has to fight his own son, who is half spider, half man.
Oh, so it's Pennywise.
Worse. Imagine Pennywise with Roland's gunslinger skills.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a whole honey bunches of nopes right there.
Yeah. I don't want to know what he was smoking at the time, but hey, can I get some of this?
Yeah.
Just think how many work you would have to edit your sound files if you were stoned while recording.
Oh boy.
Hey, just imagine my output if I was on speed if I was recording.
I mean, you'd think that it would help, but all that medication that I took for the first part of my life, I was on that while doing Planet Hell, which is essentially just speed. It definitely did not help the work output, if that makes sense. I mean, I could write a lot more in a day, but it was stuff that had to be cut later on.
I mean, in terms of narration.
You could.
Pretty much, I'm pretty sure if I were to take speed, I'd be done with Homelands in 2 days.
Yeah, but we wouldn't.
First of all, and second of all, imagine how fractionated your output would be. You would most likely jump from part to part.
Yeah. Or just get really picky and go, oh, well, I just recorded that line. Better just listen to it again. Yep, no, gotta record it again.
Actually, that's something I never do. I always
Really?
take the first take.
That was a skill that I learned in the process of my current writing project, but not something that I was able to do at all during Planet Hell. I was just constantly going back and re-editing and writing and then re-editing and then writing and then editing before even finishing the first drast.
In terms of writing, I agree.
If you always took first take, why is it if we ask you to re-record something, we normally get a few versions of it?
Because I give you creative freedom and I make different versions to let you decide which version would fit best.
Okay.
Because sometimes you guys tell me, hey, can you re-record that part for me? And it has been like a week or two since I recorded that. And you only tell me, yeah, that line. And I'm like, yeah, what situation? Who's she talking to? So I do several versions and I let you decide what to put in.
That's why I always give you the timestamp for it.
Okay, yes, still. I'm like,
or we could just do a hack and slash and just combine the three different parts apart and make 9 parts that we just scramble and put together.
Well, I can't say that I've never done that. Just remember Midnight's Billy robots. Followed Equestria Pink Eyes. My fiance was voicing the main character. And the main character, Puppy Smiles, is supposed to say, "You damn bully bots." What she made out of that was, "You damn Billy robots."
Uh-oh.
Instead of asking her to re-record, I chopped up the audio so that it at least sounds a little bit like bully bots.
You couldn't get her to do another take?
Pretty sure I would have been able to, but I didn't want to ask.
Yeah, and that is perfectly fair.
Now it's a time we had already a little bit of trouble with that project and her being the main character. So I didn't want to stress the subject.
No, that is fair. Yeah, to finalize the question, it's on my to-do list to come back to it, but first I want to finish Amaranth and the Mountain, and I have no idea how long that's going to take me to do. And I don't know if there'll even be a fandom around by the time I get that finished, or if it's even going to be economical for me to do more fan works. Because like, geez, how long have I been working on Amaranth and the Mountain? Since 2014?
Ooh.
2019? Oh God. Oh boy.
That's quite a bit.
It was 200,000 words in the first draft when I finally had the first draft of it done, which took about 3 years, and I took a year to edit it and get it cleaned up, and I had pretty much cut out 75,000 words from it in the process, and it's still like nowhere near where I would like it to be.
I wish you the best of luck with that, then.
Oh, well, thank you. I'll get there eventually.
One day.
Eventually, one day.
One day in the distant future.
In the year 2035.
In the
When you have a problem like this and you don't know where exactly to go, did you sometimes simply write a few versions and look which one is best, or how exactly do you decide then where to go?
Well, as far as the cycle of eternal return, the body of works that are Awakening and Planet Hell, and would have in theory included the rest of the Awakening universe. I had no idea of where I was going with Awakening. I just got it out. I didn't even think about doing multiple versions. Planet Hell, I did extensive outlining for it and planning in theory, so I could get so I wouldn't have to come back and do multiple versions of it. I could do that leg work up front. Didn't at all turn out to be what happened and what the story needed, but that's another matter entirely. But with Amaranth and the Mountain, yeah, there's going to be multiple versions of that written. And that's honestly what I would have done for Planet Hell had I not started posting chapters while I was in the middle of editing of it. Because I got to posting about halfway through that book, and there was so much that needed to be done, so much of the story that needed to be turned around and taken in a different direction, but I had already posted half of it. And it was like, well, I'm kind of in a corner here. So I took a hiatus while I figured that out, and it went on for 2 years. But I will say, though, as far as taking breaks and attempting to tackle projects that are too big for you, Amaranth in the Mountain is still, I would say, very much a project that is too big for me and beyond my skill. But in attempting to tackle it, in trying to make it the story that I envisioned, when I eventually did come back to Planet Hell, I was like, oh, well, if I'm just trying to make this story good and make it work and not make it the best thing ever, I don't actually have to substantially rewrite the prior version of it and make a whole new version. I can just make this, that, and these changes, and I can come at it from this, that, and these angles and apply what I learned from this other project over here. And I was actually able to get through it in about 3 months. And when I was done, I was able to post the rest of it.
It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you.
No, it really is, because it gives our listeners and, of course, us an insight into how you work.
Oh, thank you.
And everyone has their own method of writing. For me, for example, it is I start out with what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think about the character names, start doing backstory, and then I'm like, okay, I have these characters, what can I do with them? And once I have a storyline in my head, I have beginning point, the middle point, and the end point. Everything in between, I just fill organically.
Yeah, so you're very, character-oriented, organic writer.
Exactly. One thing that I always said when people asked me about Fallout Equestria Duty was, this story has evolved that way. The end that I eventually wrote was not the end that I had in mind originally. Because I noticed this near the second or third chapter. It was kind of like you have a window in your mind and you see what happens. All you do is write it down.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also depends, at least in my case, of what the story demands. Awakening was very much written organically, with just letting the characters do their thing. I had a very strong vision of what I wanted Lumina to be like, who Animus was, and the characters of Twilight Sparkle and Celestia, they're already written for me, basically. And I had an idea of who the Centipede was. I say that as if the Centipede wasn't just a giant centipede.
Giant robotic centipede of fun.
Yeah. The Blundermouth. But Planet Hell was very much a matter of what the plot was, of what the plot was demanding of the characters, of what the situation they found themselves in, what it was forcing them to do. And it was much more reactive, because they're in a catastrophe. There's a lot of parallels between Lumina's story and Thunder Gale's story, and that was intentional, but they're also very divergent in a lot of ways, and that was kind of the point of the two projects. Thunder Gale is the yin to Lumina's yang, that she's her character, her arc is much more character driven. Her story is much more character driven, and Thundergale's story was much more, okay, here's a horrible situation that is confronting you, and there's a ticking clock, and there's a timeline of events that are outside of his control. Discord's an independent agent that's acting to achieve his own agenda, so are the changelings, and these things are going to happen no matter what he does. It's just, what is he going to do when he arrives at that situation? And there isn't necessarily a whole lot of time to fully explore things, because the next thing is going to happen no matter what at a certain point in the story. Because they're also acting very purposefully to achieve their objectives, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. However, as much fun as this is, I kind of have to cut this short here.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Because I'll have to go soon.
Oh, yeah.
I have morning shift tomorrow.
Oof.
Which starts at 5 a.m.
Ew. Ew.
It means getting up at 3. But I must say it was very nice having you here, and I hope you enjoyed your time as well.
Well, thank you. No, this was a real treat. I like to, as much as I can, try to give back to all the other content creators, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a body of work that exists in the fandom that if I hadn't read that, like, I wouldn't have ever written Awakening. Like, I just think it's very important for us who do these kind of projects to be supportive, to do everything we can.
You are also welcome to return if you want to.
Yeah, certainly.
Because I want to try to make this a regular thing with authors, if more authors agree to come on here. And maybe at one point have a big, huge podcast with like 10 authors in here whose stories ended up on Pony&Wolf. And you can all discuss your stories with one another.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
That sounds like madness. I'm
That
totally
does
down.
sound like madness.
That sounds like the cinematic universe has always been craving.
I can already tell you guys whom I'm aiming for.
It's Author's Endgame.
Who I will ask come on here. So you solo can also look them up. One of the authors is I Saw.
I saw.
IISAW.
SAW. I'm gonna look that up right now. But
He
actually, maybe I should wait until we're done to be browsing.
He wrote a nice little story called. Wait, let me see.
Look it up and link it, man.
He wrote actually a little.
Just a little story. Okay.
Okay, it's 4 books. Okay.
It's a little story.
A little story?
The Celestia Code, the Lunar Cipher, the Twilight Enigma, and the Skylar Pseudonym.
Wait, hold on. The Twilight Enigma comes after this, but wondering what that was a continuation of. Why don't you put that in your descriptions?
I do!
You do?
Also, that those stories are released in the chronicle order should give you a hint.
Well, you released a whole bunch of stories.
Then we have what was his name? Joe something. I don't remember his name out of the top of my head. However, he wrote a story called Twilight Sparkle. Night
Mechanical keyboard.
Shift. Jaw Joe. Twilight Sparkle Night Shift is one of my favorites. Basically, Twilight Sparkle becoming an after-hours demon hunter.
Oh yeah,
That
that,
would be great.
Oh,
that was a good story. I like listening to it.
I need to listen or reread some of these things because I don't remember them. So, it's been too
also
long.
I just hate the Femfic browser because I tried that. I tried Twilight Sparkle Night Shift, and it just sent me to no stories matched your search terms. Which do I have this on?
I have a link
I
in
don't know
the.
how they're filled.
I have a
Yeah,
link in the
link.
chat.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, there we go.
Then, of course, our dear Somber.
Oh, I'm passingly familiar with all of these. I hate to say it. There's like a point in time, though, where most of the bodies of work that come after that, I'm not too familiar with it.
No problem.
Also, it's just everyone writes these long these long stories, like 100,000 words or more. It's hard.
Okay,
It's hard with a day
hard.
job.
Does anyone want to say something before I press the stop button?
I was right. You don't have it in the description.
You lied.
I usually do. Or
One thing about the long,
on
one
many
thing about
of
the long
the
chapters.
on many of the stories I even put on. This is a sequel too.
Support my work, one-time donation, release calendar, story link, author, business email, my social
Anyhow,
media.
so no one has a closing statement.
Go download all the audiobooks you can and listen to them during your day job. That's what I do.
Hey,
Don't do that.
I work in a scrapyard. I'm perfectly able to do that with no consequences. So,
You're an editor. You have access to the downloadable content. Anyhow,
Tell you the truth, that's what I do with every audiobook of
see ya,
reading.
guys.
so, yeah.